easy just to look at that and go like, yeah, I disagree with this, I agree with that, and sign off without, you know, obviously there's another side to every story. And so I appreciate you taking the time to think about, well, what would that be, and ask for, you know, what our thinking is here.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us. I think that the community had some just general questions, and we have Barbara here, and I had just shared the link, so there's going to probably be people kind of hopping in.
Okay.
Talk. But
hello, Barbara.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you.
Good.
It's a beautiful day.
It is. Would you want to just kind of like generally walk us through? I know there's information everywhere, but I'm going to actually record this video and then share it with our group. So yeah,
so there's a couple of ways we could do it. I do have a kind of a small presentation that I could run through.
Great.
Some graphics and stuff to it, and I could make it a, you know, so it moves along and I don't waffle endlessly, but it does give us something to form our thoughts around.
Great.
And as we're doing that, if people had questions, they could just ask. There will be a version of this going up on the website, a more canned one, but it's better like this, because then if people feel something's unclear, then they can ask me for clarifications.
Great, that's awesome.
And also the gentleman who joined us, Alex Handel, he's also on my staff. We thought, as he may be talking about this project, this might be a good time for him to join and sort of hear this discussion, so he can, you know, also develop his understanding of the project. He hasn't been to the site, or Deanna and I have been working on this for a number of years.
Cool, awesome. I'm going to be multitasking a little bit here, because as people are, I'm trying to get all the questions, make sure that they're all
understood.
Thanks.
As I say, Deanna and I have been doing a lot of these over the last month, so we know that it's a handful to keep everything on your screen, and then you pull something on your screen and everything else gets moved around. And
exactly. Great. Well, I'd love to hear your presentation. Anything that you have to share.
Okay.
Great.
So while we're waiting, maybe I'll just take the opportunity to just get that opened up on my.
Okay.
So Renee, one other item. As I'm not familiar with your group, what's the sort of geographical area or area of, is it a geographically limited group, or is it a certain focus on a certain type of activity?
Yeah, sorry, I'm keep muting myself because we've got a lot of noise here, but it's
yes.
Elmhurst, Illinois News and Comments. So it's just a Facebook group where a lot of Elmhurst residents are in. And
okay. Yeah. No, that's good. So Elmhurst, the reason is I can tailor this a little bit to folks in Elmhurst.
Can you repeat the name of the group, the name of the Facebook page?
Yeah, sure. Elmhurst, IL, News and Comments.
Okay.
Yep.
So I can start talking anytime you're.
Yeah, sure. Yep, whenever you're ready.
Oh, you're ready? I could go now? Okay. So as I said, my name is Stephen McCracken. I am a water quality scientist. I work with the Conservation Foundation, but I work full-time as a kind of environmental consultant for about 40 municipal entities throughout DuPage and Cook County, including the village of the city of Elmhurst. The reason this project, this project is part of a larger set of activities and goals, which was to improve the water quality in Salt Creek, East Branch DuPage River, and West Branch DuPage River. And also, Renee, if I'm going to be putting this up on the screen for you to see, I think you need to make me, or give me, I can hit share screen here. So
oh, yes. Let me see if I can pass it to you. Let's try it like this.
Yeah, well.
Does that work now? Did it turn green there?
There we go.
Great.
Okay. Okay, everyone can see that? Okay. So you can see my first slide?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay. So, yeah, so the group was put together to try to improve environmental quality of those river systems, but do it in a cost-effective way. There's a lot of pressure on area wastewater treatment facilities to continually increase the levels of treatment, and the sums of money are gargantuan. And of course, there's also a move to put increasingly clean up stormwater inputs into the river system. And the goal of all of this is the regulatory entity, and by default us, is to then match those goals, and it is to improve the fish and the insect population in the river system to match the goals of the Clean Water Act. So here's a list of the membership of the DRSCW. As you can see, we have the village or city of Elmhurst is in there, also Villa Park, Addison, Itasca, Schaumburg, Roselle, and obviously a lot of other members heading out west, but I was just going through the villages which are in proximity to Elmhurst. City of Oak Brook is also a member. They do not have a wastewater treatment facility, but we do work with them with their stormwater management, including things like chloride control from winter de-icing operations. So this particular project, this got started when back in 2004, the state of Illinois came out with a thing, total maximum daily load. Sorry, it does get a little wonky. But what is this total maximum daily load? It basically sets how much of a pollutant you can put into a waterway before you break the state water quality standard. Now, all of the treatment plants are operating at the water quality standard. So in other words, they are meeting their permits, and they are putting in water in the volume and quality that is asked of them. But the stream itself is still not in compliance. So what this study suggested was that we would in fact bypass, or we would increase the level of treatment beyond what the water quality standard was in order to pull the stream into compliance. And when we're talking about compliance in this state, there's a kind of a micro compliance and a macro compliance. And the micro compliance is dissolved oxygen. It's a parameter in the stream. It's basically the oxygen in the water column that is available for gilled organisms to breathe. And then there's this macro compliance, which is that those organisms are present, and that's measured by the diversity of both the fish and the insect population. Okay, so I set that right there. So there's a number of cost estimates coming out there, but in 2018, when we were looking at putting this together, this proposal, we went back to the wastewater plants and we looked at the costs of implementing the increased treatment at the wastewater treatment facilities. So these are for all of the wastewater treatment facilities on Salt Creek, including Bensonville, which is part of the group, and therefore although they're not discharging to the dam area, they're still caught up in the same agreement. And the engineering study came back. It is a 1,000-foot level study, but there's no reason to believe that it's not overall accurate. Was $213 million in capital costs. Now, I want to stress that that is capital costs because it would also raise the cost of operating every one of those plants. We're estimating that in the region in today's dollars at about $7 or $8 million in additional treatment costs. So that would be every year, and then obviously that would inflate into the future. So those sums of money obviously sends one looking around for, well, are there other possibilities here? So the city of Elmhurst, for example, I'll look at them specifically. This is from the study. You can see Elmhurst at the bottom there. So you're looking in the region of $23 million in capital upgrades in 2018. So that would be in the region of 26, 27 million in today's dollars. Okay, now, once again, this is one of several activities that wastewater treatment plants are being faced with. So we can talk about upgrading a wastewater treatment plant, but that's one way to talk about it, but we think about it in multiple ways because there's multiple pollutants sometimes that they're being asked to deal with, and not all of those are dealt with in the same way. So a treatment plant, sometimes the modality of dealing with two different pollutants will pull the treatment plant in two different directions. So by treating one, it becomes harder to treat for the second one. So this is one pollutant, but there's multiple other ones that they're being asked to deal with. So those treatment costs, for example, would not help with dissolve or with phosphorus, which is another one that they're being asked to work on. So this is a table from the state, and it covers, they break this out. This is how they govern these things. This is for the reach from I-88 all the way down to the Des Plaines River, which the Grobby Mill Dam sits in. So what I've done here is this is the table essentially as we extract it from the state's evaluation, and I flagged certain areas in red that are relevant to the dam. So you can see here in the causes, so as we read the table from left to right, we've got these, well, I guess we go to the designated use not met type thing, where you see aquatic life, fish consumption, primary contact. The one there that really falls to the treatment plants is aquatic life, and that's measured by fish and insect populations. Then as we move into the next list, we've got all that list of things there. The treatment plants can really affect out of that list based on their operations would be the sediment or would be the phosphorus really out of that list. The rest of those items either come from stormwater runoff or from some sort of in-stream activity. So then we move to the causes. So that's where these come from. And you can see here that the state evaluator has shown a number of items. The ones we're interested in are the sediment siltation, dissolved oxygen, and other flow alterations. And as you can see in the next list, then they list there the dam impoundment and such. Sorry, everybody's little view bar is covering up, so I'm not looking at it, but impacts from hydrostructural flow, upstream impoundments, etc. Those are referring to the Grobby Mill Dam area. So the state then produces this report, and what they do is they go through it and they look at this bit here, which is the 303D listed causes, and they will then start implementing that onto the treatment plants. Now, the reason they do that, the metaphor that I like is that they have a wrench, and that wrench fits a wastewater treatment plant. They're not very well set up to go out to parking lots and start saying, well, you've got to stop oil and grease running off your parking lot, or you see mercury there, that's coming from atmospheric deposition. That's an airborne pollutant. They really don't have, there are other permits that deal with that kind of thing. But say sediment siltation, for example, that's not coming from a wastewater treatment plant. That's coming from either like bank erosion or from deposition of sediment behind the dam in this particular case. That's really not something that a treatment plant can deal with, but it does impact the ability of the riverway to support aquatic life. So the state produced this TMDL. No need to go through this table. All I'm trying to show there is that they look at a number of scenarios. They look at upgrading all of the wastewater treatment plants. They look at removing sediment from the bottom of the river. That sediment actually robs the river of dissolved oxygen. And then in two of those scenarios, they also look at removing the dam at mile 13.5, and that's the Grobby Mill Dam. So these are computer scenarios that are run on a model. So this, this was a big step for the state. It was one of the first TMDLs in the state, and it was a big effort on their part. But there was what I'm referring to as a fatal flaw in it. And what it was is they assumed that all of the treatment plants were using their permit limits to discharge. So, if they're discharging a given pollutant at, they can put 10 units into the stream on a day. Well, they assumed that this plant was putting 10 units into the stream in a day. In fact, the plants operate more like 5 or 6 units per day. The reason for that is if their storm comes through, the plant's operations are affected. So they'll start putting out more of that pollutant, and they can breach their permit, and therefore they would then be fined. So, but if they operate at 5, that fluctuation would typically maybe go to 2 to 3 more units north of that. So they get up to 8, but they still have a margin of safety to the 10. But what this means is that the Model A overemphasized how much of the problem was being caused by the treatment plants, and B then overemphasized how much the treatment plants could do to fix it. we reviewed the model and we pointed this out, and the state and the contractor both agreed in writing that in fact it was a fatal flaw, and the model was not accurate in terms of allocating who was responsible or where the various dissolved oxygen problems on the river were coming from. We built our own model. This was with agreement with the state, and we took a lot of time over it. This is an output from the model, but just to point out, we gathered a lot more empirical data. We used actual plant loadings. In other words, what was the plant putting out at the time we were monitoring? We monitored 24 hours a day over a whole year. Actually, in this case, it was 2 to 3 years. We took hourly readings of dissolved oxygen. We also measured things like how much oxygen was actually being demanded by the sediment in the river, which were all additions to the state model. And this is what the river system looks like. Obviously, we're starting at the Bussey Woods Dam on the far left, and then we move down to the Des Plaines River at the right of the screen. These vertical gray bars represent the dams, which is Oak Meadows Dam, then the Old Oak Brook Dam, and then the Growey Mill Dam. And you can see the Growey Mill Dam is the largest one of three with the biggest sediment mass behind it. And we, what we find hardly surprising was it was the one with the biggest, drop in oxygen. Now, this is what I was referring to as a kind of a micro pollution argument. Obviously, the costs of fixing this were not micro, but we're interested in dissolved oxygen because it improves the fish life. The fish need it to breathe. So the fish are the ultimate goal, but the dissolved oxygen is a necessary stepping stone to getting there. We also—
Interrupt for just a second, Stephen?
Yes.
I don't actually see it on here, but maybe it's called something else. Is it called the Fullers? Is that what?
Oh, yes. Sorry, that's an excellent point. Yes, it's called the Fullersburg Woods Dam.
Okay, so, and what we're looking at here is we're trying to— can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, so on this graph, what we're trying to do is see that little line has moved a little, but that red line is approximately 5 milligrams per liter. So anytime we go beneath it, we are violating state water quality standards. So we've got this black line. The black line is the daily average value for dissolved oxygen. And then the red line, there is also an upper line on this. We've taken it away to simplify this. But the lower line is then the minimum in the day. So both the black line obviously should be above the red line, but ideally that red dashed line should also remain above the horizontal red bar at all times. So what this is showing is that, dams, because of the sediment buildup behind the dams, we get an oxygen sink there. That's pretty well recognized throughout these systems, and these systems particularly are sensitive to that. Those two smaller dams do have an impact, but the Fullersburg Woods Dam, just given the size of it, you've got about nearly a mile, which is impounded with sediment gathering up in it, has an outsized effect compared to the other two. And that's just a relationship of the size of the dam. It's not really anything else.
So the reason that this is really important is because I'm trying just to understand the minimum DO and average DO. Those are measurements, and the reason that the DO matters is because it supports fish life or doesn't, and that's the whole goal of removing it, right? And
from lab studies, we have found that organisms become stressed once they're subjected to oxygen beneath 5 milligrams per liter. So that is the state water quality standard. It's more complex than that, but that's the broad one that we're using here.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that.
No, thank you for the questions. Sometimes you look at these things so often that you start to assume that it's perfectly obvious.
Stephen, I have a question.
Yes.
Are you taking out those 3 dams that you talked about?
Yes.
Those 3 other dams?
Yes. So the one at the left-hand side of your view, the Oak Meadows Dam, it has been removed. It was removed in 2017. No, 2016. Sorry. And the Old Oak Brook Dam is the least. It's the least influential of the 3. But we would like to look at removing that one as well.
Is that for the same reason, to support the aquatic life?
Well, it doesn't really have much of an influence on dissolved oxygen, but the reason that we're primarily interested in it is we're worried about it as an obstacle to fish passage. If the Fullersburg Woods Dam was modified, that the fish could not penetrate through that structure. It is a much smaller structure. It's not a controversial structure in any way, but we would be reticent to spend money to remove that second dam without modifying the Fullersburg Woods Dam, because we don't get any benefit from taking the smaller one out without the bigger one coming out. Getting both out would be optimal in terms of restoring biodiversity in the river.
And I think it's important to know that this is, part of a larger, bigger picture. Is, Salt Creek by Lyons flows into the Des Plaines River. And after this year, after 2018, all of the dams on the Des Plaines down to the Brandon Locks, which has a whole nother issue, will be removed. And we're already seeing impacts, which Stephen will talk about, in lower Salt Creek because of the Des Plaines dams being removed. We are seeing fish moving up and new populations being established that were never seen before. So the Fullersburg Woods is a critical piece of not only just Salt Creek's ecosystem, but the entire, upper Des Plaines system.
That's great. Thanks for clarity. That's very helpful. I have a question based on what you've shared, both of you have shared. So I was thinking, it's almost like more natural to remove them, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't it? Because yeah,
we'll talk a lot about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it creates a more natural river condition, if that's
right.
Yeah.
So it's a healthier river and it's a more alive river, right? Because the aquatic life.
Yeah. Because that's uncontroversial. Yes, I could definitely put a stamp of approval on that. We just need to be careful how we say it.
Okay.
we sort of didn't get to why, but that's why we're seeing these DO issues. Because it's a physical barrier, and if you've been to Growy Mill, you see the big impoundment. Like when you stand at the dam, right, and you look downstream, that's what the river should look like. So when you turn around and look upstream, you see that big, wide, flat, still water. It's that lake, or what we call an impoundment, that's leading to all of these dissolved oxygen issues. But those conditions in that impoundment also are not good for the fish, the fish, the turtles. That's not what they like to live in. Their stream systems, not lake, systems. Even the vegetation that grows in there is not the vegetation we want in a river system, because it starts to migrate to that lake stuff. So that's when you kind of get into that more natural. Yeah, we would really, removing the dam would do a lot for the health of Salt Creek and the ecosystem that should be in that creek.
That's beautiful. So what kind of effects could we expect to see that would be really cool, that people would maybe be excited about?
Steve will talk about some of that in these next couple
we'll
slides.
get to that. We have a couple of images to show, and so of course the other big thing is that it just blocks fish swimming into the system. So we know from mapping out the fish in this system that we see a much bigger or higher fish biodiversity beneath the dam than above the dam. So that tells us it's not really a water quality item, because the quality of the water coming out of the treatment plants, it's the same water, half a mile beneath the dam as it is a mile above the dam. So why aren't those fish populations the same? Well, it's because the fish, as they move into the system, they cannot penetrate that barrier. If you like, at one point the fish was near zero. Then some of the more tolerant species come back, and as the water quality is improved, more and more move back. But at this point, they can't come through the barrier. It's just that easy. I mean, it's a locked door essentially. And that's what you see here is, we map these out every mile, and you can see here that bulge at E there, line, that's where the dam is, and we get this kind of like this drop off of species. And so we monitor them. These are the fish species that we're missing on the far left of your screen. There are 18 listed there. We really talk about 16 of those, because those are the 16 native fish. There's 2 in there that would be considered non-native, goby and the weatherfish. But the other ones, there's some pretty interesting ones. I could see the 2 images we have here. The one with the northern pike at the bottom right hand of your screen, that is a picture of a northern pike caught beneath the Fullersburg Woods Dam. So that is an example of the type of fish that we're trying to get through the barrier here. The other one, the gar, that goes back to what Deanna was saying. It's the first time we'd ever found one of these in the river. And it had actually swum up from the Des Plaines River following the removal of the Hoffman Dam on the Des Plaines River. So it was able to push up through there into the system. So we found one in 2016. We haven't been back to monitor since, but it was still, this is like a strategy game where, you remove each one of these barriers and it improves, but sometimes you can remove the barrier. If there's still a downstream one, it will mute some of the impacts that you're having.
Yeah. And we have two types of fish here. We have fish like the northern pike that are really good recreational users and fishermen. Like those are things they like to catch. Not so many people are really excited about the gar, but the gar is a really good sign of a healthy stream. So that's what we're interested in. The more that we can get, some of the fish that we're looking to move are not very fancy. I mean, I always tease Stephen, they're always gray and ugly and they're little. But there are some game fish and some other, but those fish are critical to a healthy aquatic ecosystem. Yeah. So they're important and we need to have them there because then they spawn the whole life cycle of everything else. Because, when they're there, we have healthy macroinvertebrates and that's where we get our dragonflies from. And that's what the turtles eat and that's what the frogs eat, and it all, spirals up the food chain. But then we also have these really critical, game fish that will bring fishing, people trying to fish right below the dam because there's some really great stuff. We'll be able to move those up to through the system too and increase fishing opportunities, for you guys in Elmhurst.
As Deanna was pointing out, one of the amusing things that has happened as we've been working on this is that, IDNR, who deal with fisheries, they're very focused on game fish. So the northern pike and stuff, they love that. But our wastewater treatment plant guys are now more and more interested in the little darters and stuff that are forgotten because they need that to hit their permit goal. So it's a incongruity that amuses me, I guess. Okay. So we also map out macroinvertebrates. That's a kind of a basket of aquatic insect biodiversity. So once again, if we go to River Mile 10 there, you can see that E triangle. That is the Fullersburg Woods, or the Growy Mill Dam again. And you can see there that we get this big dip in biodiversity. In fact, above the line 40 there, we're in compliance. You can see as soon as we hit the dam, we are falling out of compliance. And the reason for that is it's partially dissolved oxygen, but it's mainly just the amount of mud and sediment that builds up behind these dams. The insects that we're judged on are for hitting the biodiversity goal, they need rocky bottoms, like gravel type bottoms, and those exist at Fullersburg, but they're completely covered up with mud collected from behind the dam. And the silting in of dams is just a feature of dams. It's part of the way they function. They create a pole behind them. When that water is not moving, it can no longer carry sediment. So any sediment that it carries is deposited. As that happens over years and over decades, you start to get, large amount of sediment build up behind the structure. And in fact, if you go and stand on York Road and look up north into the dam area, you will see a large sediment bed forming there. That is going to continue under the current setup. So even if we were not proposing these changes, something would have to be done at the site in order to keep the various pieces of the dam functioning and not silting in. This graph looks very similar. This is actually habitat, and it is not something that's typically scored in the list, but it is absolutely critical to supporting the biology. And in fact, if you take this graph and overlay it onto this graph, you'll see that the two correspond very closely. So once again, it just goes to the point is that the insects and the fish do not exist in a vacuum. They do need a certain level of water quality, but they also need a certain level of habitat, be that the kind of the bottom of the stream, the vegetation, etc. All those things also are absolutely critical to supporting the biology that we need. And that's why we have wastewater treatment plants that are, putting in stream habitat, which is something pretty unique to the DuPage area. I'm no longer being able to advance here, apparently. Let's see, take a run at it. There we go. Okay, so we looked at a number of ways to try to deal with this issue. This is a table of impacts and activities with the relevant costs. So on the left-hand column, you've got the options. You see dam modification, removal, STP, that's sewage treatment plant upgrades, air-based systems. So this was pumping oxygen into the water to make up for the dissolved oxygen loss, and then it was dredging the impoundment and putting in a fish ladder. So we have looked at each one of these and then mapped it out against the objectives that we need to hit to try to get the river into compliance. And those are fixing DO, improving fish scores, improving insect scores, improving habitat. So you can see there, the only one that hits all of those goals is the dam modification. And it is also relative to the other ones, especially the treatment plant upgrades, it is extremely cost effective. I would point out that the cost for the treatment plants that we've estimated there is for capital upgrade only. It does not include the maintenance and operation increase that I had said. The maintenance and operation increase for a single year under that level of treatment would pay for this project for 1 year. So yeah, the cost benefit to the taxpayer and the utility bill payer on this is it's just, in fact, that sum of money is so large, I would suggest, say we got it wrong by 100%. So take 100% of away. No, it's 100 million. It's still, the cost benefit is still extremely, we couldn't ignore that kind of cost benefit. I didn't feel we were representing our clients and the taxpayers properly.
Can you
yeah.
I'm not understanding it, and I just might be me, but I just want to verify.
Okay. No, please.
Rewatching this will understand what you just said. I think that's probably really important to a lot of people. So
do you want me to go through it again?
No, I just want to understand. So the cost benefit, you were saying the benefit to the taxpayer is enormous, right? That's I understood that part. And you said you made a comparison, and I was just wanting you to.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
I think what he was trying to say is, so, we've estimated these costs, this is, capital upgrade. So there'd be, an annual reassessment too, that if we were significant, because people question these costs because they're so extravagant. I mean, it's crazy to think it's, $213 million. People are very shocked by that. And so I think what he was saying, that even if, say we were overestimating, which we don't believe we are, we've looked at these numbers, we've had 2 or 3 different consultants look at these numbers for us who actually, build these systems, that even if we were off by 100%, and it was only going to cost $100,000, $100 million to upgrade, the cost benefit of doing that is still not there. We'd have to be off, we have to be overestimating by, it would have to be, a quarter, more than a quarter, what is that, like a 8?
20, yeah. If we reduced our treatment costs to 25% of what we estimate they will be, it's still, the cost still hold up. So it's orders of magnitude different.
People are really, we talk to a lot of different groups, and people are always like, well, we think you're lying with those costs. And we don't feel we are. We've done a lot of research, and we're very confident that they're realistic. And what we've actually found, when you actually get into design and construction, these costs tend to go up over the estimates, so we feel very confident. But even if we were wrong, we would have to be very, very wrong in order for the benefit to not still be there.
Yeah, and recently there was a new treatment plant that was built at the village of Itasca. And that plant, it's a small plant. It's like half the size of Elmhurst plant. That plant, that was like, I can't remember exactly what it ended up being, but that was in the $50 to $90 million range to build that plant. And that's a new plant, so it's cheaper to build a new one than it is to retrofit an old one. So the other point I was saying was that the 213 here is a capital cost. So that's upgrading the treatment plant to be able to do that level of treatment. What it doesn't include is the maintenance and operation costs of actually running that level of treatment. Those levels of treatment cost increase are more expensive per year than removing the dam. So we could remove, if we're saving that money, we could remove a dam like this every year and still be saving money. Okay, so just one other thing there was we did look at dredging the impoundment. We didn't model any of the water quality impacts of that, but it's still you can see in the millions of dollars range. And it didn't help any of the fish passage. It didn't improve any of the environmental goals. It does make the impoundment look better, and it would it would deal probably with some of the smells, etc., over a period of time.
And what does dredging the impoundment mean?
Okay, yeah. No, this is good for me because I throw these terms around like that. So it's basically where you go out and you have some sort of surface excavator or something, and you basically lift all the mud out of the impoundment and you scrape it down to its gravel base, and then you collect that mud and you take it off somewhere to dispose of.
And you have to do that anyhow periodically behind a dam. So the Growy Mill Dam, or the Fullersburg Woods Dam, was dredged back in the 1990s, and it's getting to the point that it's going to need to be done again. Just because if it fills up, then water will start to flood and move out, and you're starting to see that a little bit during those lower flow, during even the higher, like during normal flow at Fullersburg. How Stephen mentioned, when you walk there, you'll see these large mud flats that are accumulating. They're mainly on the east side near the dam, but then when you move up by the nature center, there's this big, large mud flat in front of the nature center. I was just there this weekend. And that's sediment that should, through natural processes, be moving downstream. And then but it's being blocked by the dam and filling up. So, when the dam gets too full, you've got to get in and scoop it all out.
So basically that's like an ongoing process, and it costs a lot of money to do that. And so this actually removes all of those costs, right? Is that?
Yeah, the long-term maintenance. Yeah, and so Stephen, before you go into this, I think it's better to break and let me show the renderings.
Sounds good to me.
Before we get into these little questions.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna take over.
I'll stop sharing.
You have to stop sharing.
Yeah, done.
So, okay. So, how Stephen talked a lot about, he talked about how we looked at different options besides for dam modification. We looked at some of those mechanical, manual things. We looked at, just even dredging, because sometimes dredging, once you get rid of that sediment for a short period of time, you get better DO because there's there's stuff in the sediment that sucks out DO. So dredging can be used to somewhat manage the DO, but like he said, nothing fix all of our goals, because we need to not only fix the DO issue, we need to fix the fish passage issue and the macroinvertebrate issue out there. We have these multiple goals. And then we started also taking into consideration long-term maintenance, because like you said, things keep costing more money every so many years and just sort of gets back. So we wanted to evaluate some of our solutions with maintenance, because we didn't want to leave the Forest Preserve District, because that's who owns the dam. So the dam is owned by the Forest Preserve District. We didn't want to leave them with a long-term project, like do something that, in 10 years is going to cost them, $8 million to fix or do maintenance on. That's just not fair. So we looked at various ways of modifying the dam, because we understand, and we have a good, we understand that people are very tied to the dam. We know there's a big public sentiment that the dam is there. And I saw, like in your email, that the dam's been there for 200 years, which is not true. And we could talk about the history of the dam if we want to get into the history, but we know that people see the mill and they have this tie, and they believe that the dam runs the mill and stuff like that. And there's a lot of separation there. And we can walk through some of those issues on why they're maybe not as big as some people see, or we don't feel that we can't work with them to preserve the integrity of the site. So we did go through, and I won't go through all the details on them, but we did not just look at, like, our first plan was not like, let's just blow up the dam, woohoo, fun. That was not our objective. Our objective was to really see if there were other options we could do. So we talked with people about what's been done around the nation. We talked with different consultants, and we evaluated things like, could we remove half of the dam? Because then if we removed half of the dam, right, we could get fish passage, right, because the wall would no longer be there. What would happen in the impoundment? And we'd still maintain the history. People like the dam. Like, what would it be there? But when we look at those options engineering-wise, we've already invested about $200,000 into our science behind the project, just with design options, that it doesn't work. Like, what happens is, I can actually show you with this, and we'll come back to these other ones. But what happens is it gets really ugly because of the way that Salt Creek is and the way the dam is constructed. We have to build this giant wall, that's listed here as E. It's not very attractive, right? Like, this is not pretty. Plus, the impoundment is still there. We're still getting, this is where Stephen's talking about that mud flat. You can actually see it from the photo here, because these are like base photos that we're using. You can see that there's water over, but you can kind of see where this is like that sediment that we're talking about. We'd still have that issue. We'd still have the DO issue because the impoundment is still pretty much kept there. And then our fish ladder, which is also not very pretty. doesn't have this, the water flow is still too fast for the fish we need to get up. So we still wouldn't get the fish up the ladder. Some would move, like the northern pike, because he's big and mean, he would move up, but some of those like that gar and some of those smaller fish would not be able to get up the ladder. So it's not a viable option, but we did look at things. I just don't want people to think that our first idea was like, blow up the dam, let's move forward with this project. We did, and we talked to a lot of people, and we did a full survey, a full topographic and engineering survey of the entire impoundment all the way up to 31st Street, so that when we show you pictures, we're really confident that this is what it's going to look like. These aren't just like, I didn't hire an artist to draw these. These are based on the actual like slopes and what the cross sections look like in the channel, and using modeled flow data that DuPage County's had for years. So like, I just want to, you know, we've done a lot of work to be able to propose the project that we think best fits the goal. But we didn't just jump into like full removal. There was other steps besides for that first analysis. So
Deanna, just one other thing on that last image we were looking at. The other thing, you've got to look at these images with the idea that, you know, that silting activity continues.
Yes.
So even if we put something like that in place, we have got to assume that, well, 6-10 years from now, the silting has got so bad that that is only partially functional, even if it functioned when we first put it in, which we had testified.
Yeah.
So, you know, we need this to be ongoing. It's not something that we can, you know, the compliance lasts forever once we're complying with the law.
Yeah. And even though we found that very visually unappealing, the maintenance cost, like Steven said, the dredging is still there. That wall would need to be pretty much inspected after every major storm, because some, you know, big tree trunk, you know, could be damaged. Those weir structures throughout that fish passage would have to be instructed. There was just so much more maintenance with that option for the forest preserve, which was another reason why. So it did meet our ecological goals, and it sort of left the forest preserve district with a nightmare. So kind of walk you through some of the things that we've been working on is, you know, everyone's really focused, you know, on just the dam and the Growy Mill Dam, but this is actually a full corridor project. So the work we're doing is not just going to impact the stream miles at the stream right at the Growy Mill. It's going to impact about 1.25 miles of Salt Creek. So while the dam is like the highlight and the big project we're moving, we will be doing restoration activities all the way through the Salt Creek corridor through Fullersburg Woods. So it's not just a little, you know, like absolute project. It will impact, you know, 1.2 to 1.5 miles of stream. And we'll be looking at all the natural things that we've sort of talked about. We'll be creating, you know, habitat for aquatic insects and bugs and fish with root wads. We'll be doing a bunch of bank stabilization. Stephen talked a lot about creating this bed substrate that we need for fish and macroinvertebrates. You know, we'll be doing that all at the dam, but we'll also be moving all the way through the corridor. So we also looked for opportunities that were beyond just the ecological opportunities, and we worked with the Forest Preserve to really impact and try to pull in as much as we can to increase the education and use and recreation use of the Fullersburg Woods. So we'd be helping, as part of the project, we're investigating opportunities to install a canoe launch up near the Nature Center. There's one there, it needs a little bit of maintenance, so we'd be looking at improving that. And then building a second canoe launch down by the parking lot, that's on the other side of York Road by the mill. So people who are canoeing through the site could pull over here, you know, leave their canoe, they could walk around the mill, they could see the former project, they could, you know, hang out and bring some more people to the site that aren't just coming on the road, but bring those water uses. Obviously, with the dam being gone, we can now actually canoe or kayak through that area. So it does, you know, help with that. There is a big Salt Creek paddle trail. Sorry, I'm trying to think what the official name is. And like right now, this section of creek is not included in that nationally recognized paddle trail because of the dam. So it would bring that distinction through this area. We'll also thought that since some of these mud flats would be taken care of and the dam is gone, there's a lot of great opportunities to get the kids that are learning about nature at the Nature Center into the stream. Right now, they can't do that because they would sink in, you know, quicksand, and we'd have to pull them out. And so we'd be able to put some fishing stations and educational signs so that programming both at the Growy Mill as well as the Nature Center could access and use the creek. So we're not just thinking ecological in this dam project. We looked at working with the Forest Reserve and in their mission, so what we could do to help enhance within the site. So that's where we are. And then what everyone is always wanting to see is what would the project look like? And this is an abstract of what would happen with the creek when the dam was removed. So you can see the area that's in this lighter vegetation is pretty much what was the former impoundment. It is now obviously not going to be a lake, a flat water area. It will be vegetated. And, you know, we don't, when we do these projects, we don't just, you know, pull the dam and walk away. These areas could be strategically graded and planned, you know, into wetlands, you know, and backwater habitat, and then, you know, obviously reestablish with native vegetation. The creek, you know, does obviously, there's no way around it. Will get narrower because that's what happens when you pull the dam. You know, when you stand at the dam and look downstream, that's what it will look like upstream. We do have throughout the entire corridor that we sort of talked about on the last slide, you know, we're looking at variants between, you know, 70 and 120 feet wide. So it will get narrow, but it's not going to be a little backyard creek or anything like that. It will still have water flow year round. It'll still function just as a healthy river. Just how the Salt Creek in Elmhurst doesn't dry up in June or July, Salt Creek at Fullersburg Woods will not either. We'll be looking at educational signage, you know, around the mill too, and, you know, keeping access and building in these fishing piers to really get people down to enjoy it. This would be another this would be a visual of what it looks like. I think this is still pretty engineering well, and we have better renderings that I'll kind of move through. So this is sort of, you know, what it looks like now. Things to highlight is the mill's not going anywhere. We're not destroying the mill. We're not taking the mill building down. That is not our goal. The mill will remain. You know, but the dam will be gone, and we'd have something that would look like this. You know,
just like to add, it never was it never was anything heard, proposed, or thought about.
Yeah.
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 That's beautiful.
Yeah. So this is what we're talking about. So, you know, while the dam is gone, and people, you will still, by the way that this would be constructed with these big boulders and things like that, you would still hear the dam you'd still have that water sound. It wouldn't, you know, just be silent. You'd still have that rushing water sound. You would still have that feel of water moving, because, you know, there is still, you know, just because the dam's gone, that there's still gradient there. So just think of like a mountain stream. A mountain stream's not like a slow trickle. It's not dangerous. It's not whitewater. We're not having a whitewater park, but, you know, it will have that feel to come through there. So some of the other things that we were very, when we went through this planning, we were very much worried about was the mill. Things that will change, and this is where we can talk about, and I don't know how much you guys know about the Growie Mill, is we can talk a little bit here. So the original mill was built, it's either 1862 or 1822, and I'd have to pull that date and confirm, but that was when the original mill was here. And it was a corn grist. And it, you know, functioned. And the way that it originally functioned was that water rushed through the mill race. You know, okay, so I guess we can back up. So the dam, so about the history of the dam, I saw in your question wasn't the dam there for 200 years? And the Growie Mill, the first dam was built in 1862. And I had to pull and I did not read the big history again before this presentation, but the 1862 mill lasted about 4 years and it was washed away. And then they built another dam. And then that dam lasted a little longer, and then it washed away. And then I think the third dam that was there was built in was built in the late 1800s, and it washed away in 1916. And then for a period of about 30 years, there was no dam. Or 20 years, there was no
20
dam.
years, yeah.
Nobody was using the property. There was no dam. But then during the Great Depression, with the Civilian Corps and the CCC and the WPC, this was a CCC site. So soldiers or young men were sent to Fullersburg Woods, and they built the dam that is there now. So the dam that is there now was completed in 1931-33 by the Civilian Corps. So it is not tied to the historical listing of the 1800s mill. It was a separate structure. And that was like, when you've been at Fullersburg, I'm sure you've walked some of the paths and you see those little huts and things that are out, those little pavilions. Those were all built as part of the project with the Civilian Corps. A lot of the trails were built then too. So you have that sort of break with the mill and its wheel are historic, but the dam is not listed as a national historic site or has any sort of historic related listing.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the dam is, you know, its method of construction, the materials used to construct it, its actual shape and size are not, none of those things are period with the mill. So even if it was reconstructed, you can restruct it as period with the mill building. That is not the case. It's really, the more I look at it, the more I look at it as being a completely independent structure. It's not really even, it's not sufficient to put water through that raceway. This is something as we mapped all this out, it was clear that you know, water would only rarely get into that raceway, and that's been confirmed by the folks who operate the mill, and they do a really great job of that. But you know, there's not a sufficient hydraulic flow through there to drive that wheel on anything but very rare occasions, and that's because the actual dam that was used when this was a commercial enterprise was 10 feet tall. This one's only 6 feet tall.
Yeah. So historically, what would happen would be the dam was taller. You know, if you look here in this photo, you can see. I don't have my thing goes away. Let me see if I can find my annotate pointer.
Now you're showing off now.
I like my little pointer. So currently the mill, you can see this is the mill race here. It comes out to like here where the stream used to be, right? And so when the dam was higher, it directed flow into that mill race, and that mill race would have rushing water, you know, because it's narrow, and it was, you know, taking all the flow from the creek and rushing it into a smaller thing, and then it would come through the mill race, and it would turn the wheel. So as Stephen says, as this dam's not tall enough to do that, some water from the creek still does get in there because we are still, you know, hydraulically connected. And if you've been out there, you can see that out here, there's the trash gates. You know, they have those gates that keep trash and debris from coming in. And then they have the long mill race and then the wheel. What's still happening is because there is so much sediment being trapped behind the dam and flowing in, this gets full of sediment, and the Forest Preserve has to dredge it out about every other year or so. And it costs them significant funds. I'd have to confirm those numbers with them again to maintain that mill race. But really, the water does not naturally turn that wheel. So, and we know that inside the grinding gears where you grind the corn and those in that demonstration that they do, that's been on an electric motor since the 1990s, I believe, early 2000s. So the raceway is not really needed to run any operations within the dam. So
within the mill, rather.
What we've been talking with them is, and we've talked with the historical folks and with the Forest Preserve, because the Forest Preserve District also owns the mill. They own both the mill, the grounds, and the dam. And they lease it to the Growy Mill Foundation for their educational programming. We've been working with them to try to figure out what to do with the mill race, because as you can see from this photo, keep going back, we're going to lose that hydraulic connection. And we've looked and we've investigated all sorts of opportunities. We looked at, could keep a pipe, like a buried underground pipe that would allow water to come in and fill the mill race. There's not enough flow. It's just, there's too much, the depth and how the mill race is actually, we thought it was as deep as the dam. It is not. We have to actually put in a pump that would pump water from the creek into the mill race. And that once again becomes a long-term maintenance because the pump would have to be inspected. It would need a power source. It would have ongoing costs. So that was sort of left out. And so we end up with the mill race here. And these are obviously pictures of what this is one of the things that we want to get input on from the public. It has been suggested that we can actually shorten the mill race. We could actually fill some of this mill race in, and then still keep the actual wheel, and we'll look at pictures from the other side, in water to keep that historic tie. Or we could still leave it like this and then leave it as is. But since it's no longer going to be connected to the stream, there's options with how that would be. Like if we wanted larger picnic areas or larger native plant areas, we could have a little bit of access to more land without this structure being here. So this rendering sort of shows what it could look like. There would be a path, you'd have the mill, it would still be in a raceway here, and we'd have, sort of grounds like this. And then looking at it from standing where these people are and turning around, the mill race is sort of over here, and we have this big vacant spot. we could do a lot with like plantings and just beautifying the area and putting in like picnic patches and like actually the fishing stations. And these are sort of things that are not set, but you still, obviously the dam is, no longer there, but you get that view. You still have that view and that connection to the creek from the historic mill grounds. So here's the mill, look, here's the water wheel looking up at it. You can see the dam. The after picture looks identical. Nothing would change through the wheel structure, except obviously you have, we could have some different vegetation and we'd have the riffle structure in the background. Now we're working a lot with the Forest Preserve and we don't have a final plan with that. So the mill race would have water in it. It won't be dry. It won't be, the wheel just wouldn't be sitting in a stone trough, for lack of a better word. We are looking at ways of keeping water in it, whether that's using potable water, putting a potable water source that we could keep it filled and flushed to clean it out. The Forest Preserve has also thrown around, they're interested in green infrastructure and using green, they're using solar on some of their buildings and things like that. There's obviously where this building is, it has a basement. Since it's very close to the creek, it gets a lot of water like you would expect. So the sump pump runs continuously. So is there a way that we could use sump pump water, which is, river water, to pump back in there and sort of make it sort of, instead of pumping that water down to the drain and sending it to the wastewater treatment plant and, or what it's doing now, could we use it in the project and, sort of like a green message? And so we're looking at whether or not plumbing wise, there's plumbing rules and stuff like that, whether they could do that. But we're looking at different ways to keep, to keep this in term. Stephen sort of mentioned it. It's, the wheel has not turned in about a year, and that's because of all the sediment that has filled up, in the raceway. And it's, as the sediment fills up, you lose water, which means you lose water pressure, which means there's nothing to turn the wheel. So we're still trying to figure out, we've talked about things like even just putting something simple like a motor on the wheel that the folks who are running the demonstrations could turn the wheel on and it would slowly turn. We're looking at opportunities to see if there is a way to keep that, because they are very tied to the fact that the wheel does turn periodically. We don't have a solution for that yet, but we are investigating that. But
if there are people watching this who they have ideas or they have some, I don't know, any feedback that they want to offer? Yeah, so what we'll have up hopefully by the end of this weekend is what we're doing, and the next step for this project is we're doing some of these smaller meetings and showing these renderings, is that we're going to have a series of webinars my dog is barking, I apologize. In early July, on the 7th and 9th of July, where we're going to present this, mass-wide public webinars. And then following those, we're going to be looking for public comment. So what we're going to have is we'll have a SurveyMonkey form that people could fill out and offer, like, I'm fine with this. Like, this is great. I'd rather more natural vegetation and less trough, or I want the raceway, or I have ideas. And that's what we'll be looking for through a public comment process. And we'll be doing that publicly via our website, which will hopefully be up and running, and the registration for those webinars and all that stuff will be on that website, hopefully no later than Monday. I'm waiting for one tweak from my webmaster, and so before I make it live. Awesome, that's so cool. I love all these renderings. It's really cool to see them all.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much what we have in terms of our renderings.
Okay. Barbara, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
I do. So July public meetings, and then what's the timeline from there?
It'll be so the July 7th will be the first meeting, and that'll be at 7 p.m. We'll do a daytime one on the 9th. We will also have a recorded version of it on the website that people can watch if they can't come on July 7th or 9th. We understand that that's going to happen. And then there'll be a 30-day public comment. It's probably, actually, I think it's 32-day public comment period, because I have it ending on Friday instead of the middle of the week. So it's like, I think it's August 7th at midnight, and they'll be able to submit their comments. And then the plan will be for us to we'll be reviewing the comments obviously as they come in. We won't wait to the last minute, but we'll prepare a document that will be public that will show all the comments that we've received. It will also have a sort of FAQ response. So we'll sort of, if people have the same if people are asking questions that they need more information, we'll answer those via the website live. Like if I'm getting specific questions and people are confused, we'll be doing that. But then what we'll do is we'll try to collapse some of the comments back into like themes, and we'll write a response to those. And that response will indicate how we're using those comments moving forward. And then likely what we'll do is we will take all those comments, we'll come up with our final plan. The final plan will then be presented back to the public, probably via a single webinar video they can watch. They can see what we heard and what we did. And then our ask will be to the Forest Preserve. As I said, they own the dam, and we've been working with them and keeping them posted as we've gone through all the stuff that we've done. Because before we even did all of this work, we did a public survey, we did outreach, we did some education to help guide us on how to do all of this. And they've been informed along the way. We will present it to the Forest Preserve Board and ask their permission to move forward with the project. And then that will likely be, you know, I guess we're looking at early fall now, September, October, and it'll be presented to the Forest Preserve for an official vote at one of their board meetings to get that. And then once they do that, once they give us permission to modify the dam and move forward with the project, we would move into final design, because obviously we don't have final design in bid documents. We can't, you know, we can't show this to somebody and hire somebody. We need to get it all together. And then we'll have probably a year of that. And then it'll go to bid and construction. We're hoping to construct in either, like, it'll be low flow, so either spring or fall. Summer or fall, like low flow, winter conditions, like so outside those spring storms and those fall rains in there. Has to be done in low flow, 2021, 2023 for the actual construction. The immediate construction should probably take one of those seasons. We think we could get it done if we have good weather. You guys know how it is happening around here these days. If we have that good weather, the dam removal and then the enhancements will be up. And then there'll be several years that after immediate construction that we'll be doing vegetation management and things like that. It's not one of those do it and go. You're there on the site doing, you know, normal vegetation management after construction for anywhere from 3 to 10 years, depending on what our permits say.
And we have an election coming up in November, and I know that some of those Forest Preserve commissioners or board members, their seats are up. So will that play into this at all?
That will be up to them. I mean, we're communicating with them now. We need to move before that election. So just on our timeline, because not only, you know, to get the permits we need in construction, we have a deadline. We need to be finished by December 31st, 2023 with construction. That's what's written in our permit that our plants have. So we have a hard deadline. And in order to be able to stay with that, we need to keep moving, which is why if we can get that, you know, if we could get on that September or October board meeting, we need that time to be able to do on the final design and permitting.
And one more question. So the petition that's going around pretty much seems like a misinformation campaign. There's a lot of false claims in there. So until the July meetings, is there anything that we can do?
Yes. So what I've spent my last 3 days doing is we will have, as soon as we're working on final language and as soon as my website goes live, I will have for you guys, I will have a fact sheet that will be sort of taking Stephen's presentation and breaking it down into a front and back 2-pager that makes sense. It'll include this rendering to show that we're not taking out the mill and that we think it looks very beautiful, and a couple highlights. We're also preparing a like an email blast that explains the project highlights and what we're aiming to do, and has a call to action to register for those meetings that if you guys have a membership group you could share. And then those should all be ready. And then after next week, we're going to spend next week working on like Facebook, like memes, I guess for lack of a better word, like little images that have the link on it with pictures and some basic information that could be shared via social media. And if you guys can think of anything else that you would need, let us know. And then on the website, there'll be just the basic information about the meetings and stuff like that. But then we have a very detailed FAQ, like where you can read, like, is the creek going to be 12 feet wide? Is it hazardous to wild? You know, is wildlife going to be damaged? And we have just short, paragraphs that people can read a little bit more. And some are general, and then some are specific to this project. And that'll be linked from our website.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions that I have.
I have some questions from the couple of the threads that we had. I think you addressed them all, but I was just thinking that just to do my duty, I should probably just ask the questions and answer them.
Yeah.
So that if they're looking at it, they have.
Yep.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, cool. So is there a compromise that can be made? You guys kind of addressed that with the options that you looked through. And
So, I mean, I guess the answer is, this is the removal, something has to happen to the physical structure of the dam in order to meet our project goals. What we're looking to do, though, is we still want to honor the integrity of the use of the site and the history that's associated with the site. So we are open to discussing some of those options on, how we do with the mill race and with the wheel and with the operations and planting plans. We're interested in doing educational signage. It all doesn't have to be related to fish, although Stephen loves to show his pictures. We could have some signage that deals with the actual history of the site, the original Fullersburg family or the operations of the mill that brings some of that education outside. So when the mill's not open, it's there. There's stuff like that where we'd like to talk to them. We'd like to talk about and learn if people are interested in having that. But as of right now, we've investigated all of the potential options we think that will meet our goals in terms of actually keeping that dam structure in place.
I would also say, we were initially a lot more optimistic that we could sort of have our cake and eat it here. But the site's quite constrained. The width of the preserve at this site is quite small. So, if there was a lot more room, we could do things like we could loop the river around the dam and have, partition the flow, and that would still maintain the problems of silting and smells at the dam, etc. But it would still have water in it, and we could get our fish passage. There's just not enough room to do that. The other thing is the site's constrained because the dam itself doesn't fit the mill. So, we've this vertical constraint. We originally thought we could drop it a couple of feet to maintain flow. In fact, it barely puts flow into that raceway as it is now. And then there's silting around it, which is augmenting that problem, or compounding the problem. So that left us very little room to maneuver. As soon as we touched the dam, the flow was gone from the raceway. There was no kind of like, well, we can play around, in the margin here. So at the end of the day, we were ending up endangering fish passage and all the other improvements in order to try to keep water in that raceway. It was just proved to be impossible. That's why I would say that us, saying we'll fund putting an external or an independent source of water in there, that also is a compromise. But it also helps the forest preserve because that would be a lot easier for them to maintain rather than having to back truck at the debris, et cetera, out of there, that's deposited by the water that does get in at the current situation.
Great. Thank you, guys. And I'm just going to acknowledge this question because we just talked about the answer to it already, but just so that this person can hear their question being asked, could they modify the size of the dam so as to still let a small channel around the water wheel while opening up the majority of it? We kind of talked about that already a lot.
Yeah, but it goes to the heart of the matter. Yes.
Yeah. So that's great. I would like more information on the required upgrade. He has quotes and cost. Required by what entity and how was that cost assessed? Do you guys understand that question?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
yes.
that will be on the FAQ of the website. We have a document that talks a little bit about the treatment processes, not in super detail, and how they are broken down between the plants on Salt Creek and things like that from our engineering staff. And there's a question on the FAQ, just so when they go to find it, about is it cost effective to remove the dam, and it'll be linked in that answer. And they can have at it.
Thank you, guys.
And those costs were required by I guess you could say the state and federal government, but primarily the state, because the state says, in order to try to hit this quality goal in the river, the plants now need to exceed the level of treatment that they have. So they need to up the level of treatment to try to, cure this problem several miles downstream. So, they have the authority to do that, and that's where those costs came from. Or rather, that's where the need to spend the money came from. came from us looking at how much it would cost to do so.
I think that's all we have.
Okay.
So thank you guys so much for coming to talk with us. I really appreciate it, taking the time.
Yeah, no
One
problem.
last thing I would say, if anyone in your group or yourselves, if you look at this and think this is a good idea for the environment and a good idea for using taxpayers' money, that they would think about letting their Forest Preserve Commissioner know that they're receiving an enormous amount of pressure in the other direction, and you characterize the piece or the poll that was out there as misleading. I agree that it is. It doesn't give you anything about what's the alternative or what's the motivation here. So I think that letting those guys know that there are people out there that said, wow, these costs look crippling and it's not even going to solve the problem. It would be good to let them know that there are people out there thinking like that.
And so is there a call to action that we can actually do here that people can actually, so they call their Forest Preserve Commissioner, you said?
I think that it would be a good idea to let them know that there's people out there who are supportive. If they are, I'm not presuming that anyone on the call is or isn't, but if people were supportive of removing the structure to improve the environment and upgrade and remove those expensive upgrades, that they let the Forest Preserve Commissioner, so they're hearing both sides of this discussion and not just the people who think that this is some sort of plot to just destroy the dam,
Yeah.
We have had a couple of people, since we've posted some of the details that we've received from you and we've received from Dennis Stryker from the work group.
Yep.
Once we
He's one of our
posted
bosses.
that, once we posted that, residents were then saying, how can I go back and unsign the petition?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's exactly the next thing I was going to say, was like, how can we cancel our
Yeah, I have no idea how those
Yeah,
work.
I don't, and I suspect the nature of the beast is that it's one of those things that it's not the way those things work, those petitions. I have a general rule: I don't sign anything unless I'm trying to be a political candidate. I'll sign all of those because if they want to throw their hat in the ring, good for them. I don't care what party or whatever. More dialogue, better. But for this one, I have no idea. I'm not a social media person. I don't know how that flies.
Okay, maybe we can share our support for those that are seeing this recorded call. They can share their support when these memes come out, and they can share those on their social, and that kind of actually helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be, I think you can call to the Forest Preserve, and I think when we come out for after July 7th, getting them to submit those comments. So it was easy to submit, sign that petition. It may be a little harder to, go back in and submit comments, but putting comments that, we think this is great, it's beautiful, we like, whatever people support, whether it's the ecological side, the money side, we're putting in their comments on and showing their support through there, because then we'll have an official project record there too. And it'll be a little more formal and hopefully carry, a little more weight than something that was just spread through social media.
I would let the Forest Preserve folks know, like the commissioner for your area, let him know that, yeah, I signed a petition, but I didn't have both sides of the discussion.
So I just put in the phone number for the Forest Preserve Commissioner. It's 630-933-7683. Hopefully that's the right number. I got it from their website. So anybody watching this, give them a call and just let them know you support this if you do.
So I guess from our side, the last thing I would say is this was not something that we thought up yesterday. We've been working on this since 2005. We were very careful picking through all the cost benefit information, mapping out all those fish species, etc. The work of this group has received national attention because it's bringing, this kind of scientific approach to making these decisions, which are usually made by lawyers arguing in a back room and then there with huge public cost. So we're trying to bring this back to, scientists and engineers and economists making these decisions, as opposed to like this blunt tool of the law cracking down on local municipalities all the time.
Well, thank you guys so much for all that you do. You're awesome.
Thank you for asking us for this. I can't tell you how you impressed me asking to hear what our side of the story is.
So are you just going to share this with your whole membership on your website, or just with select people?
No, once I figure it out, I'm gonna share the record, and I'll probably upload it, if it's okay with you guys, to maybe some like YouTube or something and be
That's
able
the
yeah.
easiest way, because that's what we're doing with them. So if we can figure it out, hopefully you can, because we're not the
I'm gonna try.
psychologically advanced people. But yeah, we like all the DRS. We have the DRSCW has a YouTube channel, and that's what we've been doing. You can just save it to your computer as a file and then put it up.
Great. Okay.
So just
And
yeah,
then
just
if your website or that fact sheet is ready on Monday, can you share that with Renee?
I will. Yeah.
Okay.
Put you guys on the list and definitely get you that, and I'll keep you posted when we have more stuff that comes out.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your attention.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
All right.
And you guys.
Bye.